you are one of those who are honored by Allah. Do not belittle yourself. Do not think low of yourself. Why is someone else telling you how to feel about yourself? Change was never the result of the demand of the majority. The way you see yourself is going to determine how other people are going to see you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. And mentioned in the book, when Moses said to his people, O my people, remember the bounties of Allah upon you, that He has appointed some of you as prophets, and He has appointed some of you as kings. وَآتَاكُمْ مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِ أَحَدًا مِّنَ الْعَالَمِينَ. And He has blessed you with that which no other people of your time were blessed with. يَا قَوْمِ ادْخُلُوا الْأَرْضَ الْمُقَدَّسَةَ الَّتِي كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. O my people, go into the holy land that Allah has promised you. All you have to do is just go there. Just walk to the holy land that Allah has promised you. Their response was, قَالُوا يَا مُوسَى إِنَّ فِيهَا قَوْمًا جَبَّارِينَ. They said, O Moses, in it are men who are exceedingly powerful, and so long that they are there, we will not go there. Moses reminded them of the bounties that Allah gave them. Later on, he reminded them of a commandment that was given to them by Allah. And they said, in it are men who are exceedingly powerful. They are surrendering. So they are exceedingly powerful, and there is nothing that we can do about it. The same story was mentioned in the Bible in a manner that does not contradict what the Quran says. However, there is an extra piece of information that is mentioned. They said, O Moses, in it are men who are exceedingly powerful. To them, we are like grasshoppers, and they see us as we see ourselves. They said, to them, we are like grasshoppers. That's what we think. To them, we are like grasshoppers, and they see us as we see ourselves. We've got a very important question to ask here. How do we see ourselves? How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a grasshopper? Or do you see yourself as, it may be difficult, but I can do it? This is what they mean when they say self-image psychology. When you look into the mirror, what do you see? When you think about yourself, what comes to mind? Do you feel inferior, ashamed? Or there is that pride and dignity where you say that I have a contribution to make to mankind, positive contribution to make to mankind. So what happens now is we've got to learn about this concept. It's an interesting concept. Self-image psychology. How do you see yourself? See, the way you see yourself is going to determine how other people are going to see you. And that is why many times the easier way of manipulating you and controlling you is selling you an image for yourself. They tell you that you must think so of yourself so that they can, from there on, you are easier to manipulate and you are easier to control. For example, nowadays, give you an example from the States. And possibly you can relate to it because of television. Every time you watch TV, or TV that comes from the States, you will realize this. African Americans, these are the blacks in the States, are called African Americans. When you see them, what do you see? They're gangsters, they're dancing, they're playing soccer, football, they're doing this. But the main projection of the African Americans in the state is that they are professional athletes. They've got Michael Jordan, they've got Kobe Bryant, they've got this player, they've got Serena Williams and her sister Venus Williams. And so what happens is that the image that is presented about them is that they're good athletes. It may be true, but listen to this. There are more African American medical doctors than there are African American professional athletes. Now, by watching TV, there was no way that you can tell something like this was happening. Because the image now that is presented about them is that they're good for sports only. I remember one time I was giving a lecture, and it happened that the people who were present, because of the geography and the locality of the area, the people that were attending happened to be African Americans. And the minute I said this piece of information, one of them started weeping. He started crying. Why are you doing this? He said, I felt that I was deceived. I was cheated. Because what I was told of myself as an African American is that the best that I can do, the best that I could have done is the fact that I be a professional athlete. Not knowing that it was much easier to become a medical doctor than it is to become a professional athlete. It is much easier to become a medical doctor and not be singing and being shown on MTV. Yet, you are deprived of this image because it makes you feel superior. Or it gives you some sort of hope. And what happens is that it must be crushed. I am not going to tell you that this thing is possible for you. I like to keep you where you are now. Do not belittle yourself. Do not think low of yourself. Do not have that inferiority in you, where you see some people up here, but then when you think of yourself, you see yourself down here. And usually they say that people who have, and the Quran refers to such kind of people as people with izzah, people who've got dignity. You know, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الْمُلُوكَ إِذَا دَخَلُوا قَرْيَةً أَفْسَدُوهَا. That when the kings arrive into a village or a locality, what do? They spread corruption. But in order to do so, there is another condition that has to go with it, and that is وَجَعَلُوا أَعِزَّةَ أَهْلِهَا أَذِلَّةً. But the people in that locality who've got izzah, who've got dignity and pride, they must be debased, because these are the people that are going to be problematic for us. And that is why when Allah speaks of Pharaoh, Fir'aun was mentioned 73 times in the Quran, in 29 different chapters. What does he do? The first thing that he does is that he makes the people with izzah, with dignity and honor, he puts them down. Their souls must be crushed. Because the minute that you feel that I can say no, then you are dangerous. You are dangerous. And that is why your soul must be crushed. I quoted a man by the name of Frederick Douglass. Said that Frederick Douglass was a slave in the United States. And what happens is that when the slaves were brought, the first thing that the master would do is that he would check them out, as we say, or test them. Who amongst them is proud? Who amongst them looks problematic? Who amongst them seems to be rebellious? And then they have a treatment for them. Now, Frederick Douglass lived in the state of Maryland. And Maryland had a law. See, a slave was considered property. You killed them, you beat them, they were your property. Chattels, which means movable property. So Frederick Douglass comes in, and he sees this institution of slavery, and he thinks to himself, I am not a slave. I don't belong here. He is not my master. I am not supposed to be subjugated by him. I am not supposed to be serving him. I refuse this. And that was expected from some slaves, but they had a treatment for it. That treatment was a white man by the name of Ed Covey. If you were a rebellious slave, they send you to Eddie, who used his whip very liberally, if you know what I mean. He goes there, and for 6 months, daily, Frederick Douglass is beaten. Every day. He is beaten. They would get him and they would just whip him. And the idea and the aim is to crush his soul, to crush his self-esteem and his self-pride, because that is very problematic. And then one day, in the words of Frederick Douglass, he said, I regained my self-respect. I did the unthinkable. What did he do? He fought back. The man is whipping him every time as a slave. When they whip you, you just surrender. You don't do anything. Because the state of Maryland had a law that said any slave that attacked his honor, the master that is, his punishment was that he would be hanged, killed instantly. So now Frederick Douglass is here and he is being whipped for 6 months on daily basis. What does he do? He fights back, and the story goes on to say that he wrestled Ed Covey and he beat him severely. Then he said, that day I regained my self-pride. That day I regained my self-respect. I got my izzah back, and he said it felt excellent. Even though the consequences could have been that I might die, but like they say, if you cannot live proudly, it is time to die proudly. But you cannot live in the state of humiliation. So he said, I regained my respect back.